Now, long-term memory is not one thing. Long-term memory, in fact, is very many different skills that your brain has. And so they're all storage, and they're all storage for long term, but the things that you remember are quite different depending on where and how you store it. So, explicit memory is memory that is declarative. That means memory that you can say out loud. If I ask you, what is your mom's name? What high school did you go to? What was the last movie you watched? These are all explicit memories and they're all declarative because you can say them out loud. And so when we talked in chapter 2 about your hippocampus, explicit memories depend on your hippocampus. And if your hippocampus gets damaged, your explicit memory gets damaged. But you also have implicit memories. And implicit memory are non-declarative. They're memories that are hard to say out loud. If you know how to tie a tie and I tell you tie a tie or tell me how to tie a tie, it's very hard to tell me, even though it's very easy for you to show me, because this is implicit memory. If you play a sport and I ask you, how do you dribble a ball, or how do you throw a football, or how do you do a backflip? You're probably going to tell me like this, watch, and then you're going to do it. And it's very hard for you to describe with words how you do that. And in fact, sometimes, there are things that are clear memories. Like you throw a basketball, you shoot it, and before the ball leaves your hand, sometimes you know that you already missed. That's clearly a memory. Your mind remembers how your hand is supposed to feel when that ball releases and the ball leaves your hand. And knows that something went wrong. But if I ask you, how do you know? It's very hard to put that into words. That is a type of implicit memory. And this depends more on the basal ganglia, as other parts of your, of your limbic system, including things like your um, rewards pathways, etc. Now, you'll notice that explicit memory is broken down into two branches, episodic and semantic. Okay, so episodic memory are episodes in your life. So if I ask you, tell me about that time that you fell when you were in high school, and you tell me, I remember it was at the hallway, and I remember looking at so and so, and when I fell, it hurt, or I remember when this person laughed. Um, you can literally see the memory in your mind and basically go over the parts step by step. But it also includes things like, what movie did you watch last? What's the plot line to that movie? These are episodes in your life versus semantic memory. Semantic memory is memory about facts. Now, some memories might start out episodic, but end up semantic. So, for example, I can tell you about the time when I was in middle school, my teacher taught us how to divide decimals. And she told us that the song by Paula Abdul, Straight Up Not Tell Me, was really a song about her teaching her boyfriend how to divide decimals, because you have to put the decimal point straight up. I remember that like if it was yesterday. But when I'm actually dividing decimals, I don't have to think of that memory to remember how to do it, because that memory started out episodic, but now it's just a fact I know. And so when I'm when I'm dividing a decimal, it's just a piece of semantic memory. It's just a fact. And so if you know what the capital of Florida is, or who the first president of the United States is, these are all semantic memories. By the way, semantic memory doesn't have to be correct. I can ask you something like, what is the moon made out of? And you might say, cheese, right? The moon is made out of cheese. That's something people say. Clearly, the moon is not made out of cheese. That is wrong. But that would still be a piece of semantic memory. Because if I ask you, who told you that? There's a good chance you're going to tell me, I don't know. I don't remember who told me that or how I first heard that or when I first learned that. It's just something that you know, a factoid that in this case happens to be wrong. Okay. Again, these are explicit memories, uh, both episodic and semantic memory. Now, on the other side, you have implicit memories, and that's going to include procedural memory, classical conditioning, and priming. Now, procedural memories, the easiest way to think about this is muscle memory, right? If you're texting away, sometimes your parents see your thumbs flying back and forth and they go, how do you do that? And you go, I don't know. My thumbs just know where the letters are. I can't text that fast, but I type without looking with the home keys. And again, sometimes people see me do that and they go, how do you know where the letters are? I don't. My fingers know where the letters are. And they're actually so good at it that sometimes I make a mistake and my fingers start to delete before I even find the mistake on the page. I have to sort of look to see what the mistake was because my fingers have already started to correct it. But that also includes things like playing that sport, throwing that ball, doing that backflip, tying your tie, all of these type of muscle memories that you don't think about with words, your body just does it without you. How do your fingers know how to put a button into the buttonhole in your shirt? How to comb your hair? This is, in fact, one of the things that makes somebody a good coach. A good coach can often put into words procedural memory, and they help you, or somebody who is a novice, think about with words how to do something that most people do procedurally without really thinking about words at all. Um, Now, we already talked about classical conditioning in the last chapter. These are all going to be associations that are made, um, connections, whether it's classical or even operant conditioning. Any type of association that we make uh, comes through classical conditioning. And of course, priming. And priming tends to be one of the slightly more complex ideas. Priming is when something in the environment triggers a memory to turn on. That memory can be any of the other ones, episodic, semantic, procedural, or classical, but something in the environment triggers it to turn on. Sometimes you hear someone say a word and it triggers you to think of a song. Sometimes you're in uh, class and you remember how to do something that your teacher taught you, but at home you can't remember. You've probably had this happen to you. Your teacher told you that you had an essay due. Don't forget the essay, the essay, the essay. And you wrote it down and you were thinking, oh, I can't believe about this essay. But as soon as you walked out of the classroom, you forgot. And the whole weekend went by and you completely forgot, and you're coming to class and you still don't remember. But as soon as you open the door to your classroom to walk in, now that memory pops in. Ah, there was an essay due, right? What's happening there is that in that case, the environment, the classroom, triggered the memory of the homework to turn on. Why was it triggered? Because that's where you thought about the essay, was inside the classroom. And outside of the classroom, nothing primed you to that memory about the homework. But as soon as you walked in, that memory turned on. Let me give you a couple more examples here. Um, oops. So again, priming is the automatic, sometimes unconscious connections you make between stimulus in the environment and ideas in your mind. Now, something we often do with we use priming for our crossword puzzles. See if you can figure out any of these. So I'll go slowly. Now, the first one you hopefully don't know. The first one, number 5 across, says the first name of the child actor from The Good Son. Hopefully you don't know that. Now, the first one, or one down, says blank memory only lasts for 1 or 2 seconds and organizes information from the senses. Do you know what that is? If you said sensory memory, that's correct. Okay, feel free to slow me down or press pause here. Blank memory is part of long-term memory that can easily be said out loud. Now, if you said explicit memory, that's correct. The next one says, this is a conscious mental activity that allows information to be transferred from sensory to short-term memory. Again, how do we transfer information from sensory memory to short-term memory? Now, you might have said focus, and that's correct. Sometimes people say rehearsal here, but rehearsal is from short-term memory to long-term memory, where from sensory to short, that's focusing. Okay. This is also a mental process that is explained by the Atkinson-Shiffrin theory. Okay. What is it that we are studying, the Atkinson-Shiffrin theory? Did you say memory? That's correct. Now, number 6, we'll actually talk about a little bit later, but this is what we call the phonological loop, is a part of the mental process in working memory, which is a little bit different. But if we go back to the first question, question 5 across, the first name of the child actor from The Good Son. We didn't know what it was, but now we can look at the letters that are left or that we placed in the puzzle. And I'll give you a second to think, see if you can think of it. Did you say Macaulay? Macaulay Culkin is the child actor from The Good Son. He's also the child actor from Home Alone, if you don't know who he is. Now, the reason I did this step by step with you is because whether we're talking about the clues that we read or the letters that we use to remember the name Macaulay, all of these are primers. In this case, the clues should prime you to a memory that you have, that you should have created. And when you don't know it, then the letters on the puzzle might have also primed you to the right word. Now, this is a little bit more conscious, but sometimes they aren't very conscious. Here's something that you sometimes play. You might play. Sometimes it's called 4 pictures in a word. And so they'll show you 4 pictures and you have to guess the word. And I'm going to go slowly and see if the pictures prime you to the correct word. Did you think Canada before the word came out? Um, Again, sometimes people play a game like this on, an app on their phone. And every once in a while, you really have to think about it before it dawns on you. But sometimes it's completely unconscious. Sometimes before you even actually look at the pictures, the word just comes to you. Here's another one. Can you take a guess? Did you think beat? Okay. Um, Again, sometimes it's difficult and you have to really think about it, or it doesn't come to you at all. But sometimes the word just comes at you just by looking at the pictures. And I know I went fast in any case, um, but it's a fun game if you don't play it. All right. So again, this is priming. Priming is sometimes unconscious, but it can be conscious. Almost always is automatic. And what you're doing is you're linking a stimulus, something in the environment, turns on a memory inside of your mind. Now, classical conditioning we already talked about, but that is the association you make between two stimuli, which again becomes sort of an automatic reaction. So your phone rings, you go to pick it up, you never have to remember what is this thing about ringing? What am I supposed to do? You just know. And even though if the ring is very different, right? A chime or a um, song that you programmed your phone to uh, chime when a phone call is coming in. You don't have to think about it. You just know, oh, that's a phone chime, and I'm going to pick up my phone because of that. Okay. Now, you might be asking yourself, why would we separate memories into different groups? Why make it harder? Why not just say it's all just long term memory and leave it at that? Well, we notice that memory is different when someone gets amnesia, when someone forgets or a piece of their memory gets destroyed. Um, what happens is that sometimes one part of memory gets destroyed and another part of memory is completely available, even still. And so, for example, someone who has retrograde amnesia might forget everything that happened in their past. This is usually going to involve damage to the hippocampus or connections to the hippocampus. Um, and the same thing is true with things like retrograde amnesia. In retrograde amnesia, I'm sorry, the same thing is going to happen with antegrade amnesia. This is still hippocampus related, but now the problem isn't remembering old memories, is creating new memories. So if you've ever seen 50 First Dates with Drew Barrymore or even Dory, they have a hard time making new memories. And so they can't remember them because they cannot make them. Both of these are going to have to do with um, the hippocampus, and they're mostly going to affect episodic memory and sometimes semantic memory. With Alzheimer's disease, at the beginning of Alzheimer's disease, you're going to get people's semantic memory and episodic memory being damaged, and the same thing with other types of dementia. But if the Alzheimer's gets really, really bad, it might start to affect procedural memory. And when it starts to do that, there's a good chance this person is probably not going to uh, live for much longer. Essentially, the rest of their brain and body is probably going to start to shut down. Now, you're going to watch a video, hopefully. Um, you're going to watch a video that is available about the man who has no memory. And please watch that before you finish this slide here. And I'll pause so that you can hit pause. What you'll notice is that his episodic memory is almost entirely destroyed. Um, when his wife tells him something, and immediately asks him what she just said, he has no clue. He says, do you know why I'm going to New Zealand? And he's like, no. Do you know why she's having a party? Is it her birthday? She does not remember, even though she said it or she explained what she was doing immediately before she started asking questions. You'll notice, however, that most of his semantic memory is still intact. So he knows what Buckingham Palace is. He knows what a doctor is. He says, as far as I'm concerned, the doctors have been completely incompetent. But then he says, I've never seen a doctor, because he knows what a doctor is, semantic memory, but he doesn't remember ever having seen a doctor because his episodic memory is completely destroyed. You'll also notice that his procedural memory is intact. He knows how to play the piano. He knows how to answer a door, how to have a conversation back and forth. He also knows how to cook and how to garden, which, if you see other videos of his, you'll see other things that he can do. Um, they don't really go a lot into priming, but there's a few things that can show that his priming is still intact. Um, when his wife says, she's having a party, and he says, it's her birthday, is it? Right? That is just priming. Party, birthday party. He's just making that connection. And she says, do you know where I'm going? And he says, Buckingham Palace, right? That's just a form of priming. She asked a question, and it just turned on randomly a memory in his brain. So you can see that priming still works there. And classical conditioning, there's one major thing, which is you'll notice that he seems to remember his wife, and he has a very sort of emotional reaction to her. So um, as soon as he sees her, she's like, oh, look who it is. And he's so excited to see her. He doesn't actually remember her. If you ask him, do you remember your wedding day? Do you remember the day your wife gave birth to your children? He wouldn't remember those things because those things are episodic. What he's remembering is a classical conditioning reaction to seeing her. He sees her as, this is the lady that makes me happy, and it turns on that emotional response. Um, Now, some people do lose other types of memory. Sometimes somebody will be in a car accident and they'll lose all of their procedural memory. They don't know how to walk. They don't know how to feed themselves. They don't know how to dress themselves. And it takes them months, maybe even years, to relearn all of those procedural skills, but they still remember their name. They still remember when they were, where they were born, or that time they hung out with their friends and got in trouble, right? So their episodic and semantic memories are still intact, even though their procedural memories have been lost. So um, people's uh, different types of long-term memory might get damaged, but that doesn't mean that all of their long-term memory gets damaged, because these are quite different.